What's going on, guys? Balkan Architect here, and in this course I'm going to be talking about the graphics in Revit. So we're going to be starting off with this part 1, and in part 1 I'm going to be talking about the general program graphics that affect your Revit software, and then we're going to be moving on to some graphics that affect your whole project, meaning each view in your project will be affected by the settings that we're going to be exploring in this part 1. So without any further ado, let's get into it. The first level on which you can affect the graphics in Revit is going to be the program level. So when I say a program level, I mean basically the version of Revit that you have installed on your machine. So if we make any changes on this level, it's not only going to affect the project that we have opened up, in this case that's this project here, it's not only going to affect each view in this project, but it's also going to affect any other project that we open up in this particular version of Revit on this particular computer. Now, that basically means that all the changes will apply to any project, but that also means that if you make any changes in a particular project, let's say in this project we make some changes to the graphics on our program level, if we send this project to somebody else on a different computer using a different version of Revit, or the same version of Revit, just a different computer, those changes will not apply. So this is just for your machine. So these are usually just some preferences when it comes to graphics or some general settings. So in order to see these settings, you can go here to the File menu, you open it up like this, and then here we have the Options dialog. Now keep in mind that you can do this even if you don't really have a project opened up. I just think it's useful so I can demonstrate some of the changes. Anyways, here in the options dialog, it's basically divided into multiple segments, but in this case we're really just interested in the graphics. So I'm just going to select the graphics here, and as you can see, the graphics menu is divided into multiple categories. So we're just going to go through all of those and see how they affect our model. So the first one is the view navigation performance. So when it comes to graphics and 3D modeling software, view navigation performance is going to be closely correlated with graphics. So usually if the graphics are set up so the project looks better, it includes more detail, more elements, more effects, it's going to slow down your machine. So that's something that you should always keep in mind. Now, if you have an extremely fast computer, then these are not going to matter that much, but if you maybe have a slower machine or a laptop or something like that, it might slow you down a little bit. So the first option is to allow navigation during redraw. I tend to keep this checked at all times just because it makes it a little bit faster to navigate. And then also you have the option to simplify display during view navigation. Now this is a really common effect that you can see in Revit. Now, what this does, it either turns off or pauses some of the effects or elements that you have on your model when you're navigating. So when you're moving your model around, it just temporarily turns these off just to make navigation a bit faster. So let me show you what this is. I'm just going to cancel out of this menu, and let's take a look at this 3D view. Now, as you can see here, the shadow is over here, and we do have some shadows on the building. Now, if I start orbiting around, those shadows will disappear. And until I stop orbiting around, those shadows will not appear. Now here, if I stop, as you can see, now we have the shadows turned back on. But as you can see, while we're orbiting around, the shadows are going to be turned off. Also, this applies to some smaller elements or more detail-oriented elements, things like that. So when we orbit around, those are not going to be visible. Okay, let's go back here to the File menu. Let's go back into Options and go back to Graphics. Now, if I were to just turn this off and then click OK, you would notice that if I start orbiting around, it's going to try to keep up with the shadows, but as you can see, it's even hard like this, just because even though I have a really fast computer, it still tends to slow it down quite a bit. So let me just go here to File, to Options, and just make sure you keep this checked on. And also make sure to click OK when you apply any changes, because if you just cancel out, it's not going to apply any changes that you make. Okay, moving on, we have the graphics mode. Now, what graphics mode is referring to is basically it's supposed to improve the quality of lines in view. So that's basically controlled by this smooth lines with anti-aliasing. So what does this mean? So let me demonstrate that by canceling out of this menu, or let's just click OK. And then if I zoom in over here, as you can see, we have these diagonal lines, and these diagonal lines look like they're kind of constructed out of smaller lines. Perhaps if I go into a floor plan like this. Okay, here when the lines are straight, you don't see that that much, but when you have angled lines like this one over here that's at an angle, you can see those little dots. So it looks like it's created out of segments. So what this basically means that Revit creates these lines by creating small segments of pixels. So let me just go here to the Annotate tab and then go with detail lines just to demonstrate what Revit basically does. So when you create a line, it's going to create one segment like this, and then it's just going to offset it by a small value like that, and then just like this, and so on and so forth. So it can look a little bit weird. Now, if you have maybe a monitor that has a lower resolution, this might be more visible, and if not, it might be less visible. So it basically turns lines kind of zigzag like this. Here I have an image of a wall at an angle, and if I just zoom in over here, you can see that happening. So this is just something that the computer does in order to, I guess, make the models a bit simpler to view and represent, but it can be a bit annoying. So you have the option to turn that on or off. So here I'm just going to get rid of these lines because we don't really need those. Now, if I just go back here to File and go back to Options and go back to Graphics, you will see that we have the option to allow control for each in the graphic display options dialog, and then you also have the option to use it for all views. So this will apply the change to all views, and this will allow you to apply the change in each view independently. Now let's see how do we make that change in each view independently. So if I just click OK here, and if I go here to the visual styles, here we have the graphic display options for the view, and here we're going to have that option to use smooth lines with anti-aliasing. So if I just zoom in over here at this line, maybe turn on the thin lines. Okay, that doesn't help. Let's maybe create an angled line. I think that would be the best option. So there we go. We have this a line like this. Maybe turn on 10 lines to see it a bit better. So we have that line, and now let's go here to graphic display options and turn this on, and then hit apply. As you can see, it makes it just a little bit thicker. So that's it just adds a few more pixels to make that that line a bit smoother, and that's pretty much it. So that's what that is referring to. So these are just really some fine settings that some people tend to find a little bit annoying. Also here, when I highlight this, you can see that happening. So those kind of dashed or broken lines. So that's something that you can fix with this option. It's controlled either here, or you can control it here globally when you go into the options and then go to graphics. So that's what the graphics mode is all about. Then moving on, we have colors. Now this is a bit more fun than the previous panels, and this is referring to the colors on your monitor. So the first one is the background. Of course, it's set to white, but for example, a lot of a lot of Revit users are coming from the AutoCAD environment, which usually has a dark background, and you can replicate this in Revit here in colors. So if you just change this to black, perhaps click OK again. Here, as you can see, you will get an interface that now has a black background with white lines. Now keep in mind that the rest of the panels and ribbon and everything else will have that regular white color, so it might look a bit weird to have this contrast, but nevertheless you do have that option. Now I'm just going to go back here to File, go back to Options, and then come to Graphics, and here we can just set this back to white and then click OK. Okay, so once this is set to white, we also do have a couple of more options. So we have the selection and then the pre-selection. And then you also have this semi-transparent option. So what does this mean? Well, when you want to select an element, you can either pre-select it, so that's basically hovering over a button. So for example, here this cancel button, it highlights in blue when I hover over it. So this is considered pre-selection. And then also you have the selection. So this is when you click on that. And also the semi-transparent means that when you select an element in Revit, it will become transparent. So let me demonstrate how this works. So I'm just going to click OK, maybe go to the 3D view. Okay, so let's come to this roof, and as you can see, if I just hover over it, it just turns blue. So all of the lines that are on this roof will turn blue. So that's that pre-selection. And then once you select it, it goes into selection mode, so it turns blue and it turns semi-transparent, so we can see all of the elements underneath. So that's what that is referring to. Now, of course, we can make a change by going here to File, to Options, to Graphics, and then, for example, we can change the pre-selection to red, and then, I don't know, maybe the selection to something else like this, blue. And then if I just click OK, as you can see now this highlights in red, and when we select it, it highlights in that blue color. So you do have that option as well if you want to make that change, but let's just go back and reverse this change. Now if I just go back here a few times, and then if I hover over it, you will see that the change is still applied. So these steps or the undo option didn't really clear this off. So this is something that's not affected by the undo button, so keep that in mind. Any of the changes that you make, if you want to change it back, you have to go here to File, you have to go to Options, then to Graphics, and then to make the change here. Or actually, that's this color, and let's see. Let's use that blue color that Revit uses. Now that the blue color is not going to be one of these main colors here, as you can see, these blue colors. So if you want to find it, or if you accidentally change it and want to change it back, just go here to the RGB, or red, green, and blue, and here you can input actual values. So we're just going to leave the red at 0, the green at 56, and then the blue at 189, and that's going to give you that exact blue. And let's just apply that here as well. So it's going to be 0. You can use the tab key to switch through these menus. This will go to 56, and then this will going to be 189. Then if we just click OK, there we go. Also, we have the alert color. Now this is also important and interesting. So the alert color is, well, the color of alert. Let's see how that works. So if I just click OK, go maybe to a floor plan like this, and let's say that here we have a door, and then I'm going to add another wall, maybe like that. And if I slide this wall over the door, as you can see, the whole thing highlights in orange. Now, if I just go back one step, there we go. Now it's no longer highlighted in orange. I can go here to File, go to Options, go to Graphics, and then here we can make a change. So I can select this color and perhaps change it to something else. So let's change this one to red again. Click OK. And now if we move this here, you will notice that the whole thing highlights now in red, so it's no longer orange. So that's just some of the fine tuning and adjusting preferences if you do have any that are dedicated colors of alert or selection or something like that. But of course, you can always change everything back over here in graphics to the original settings. And in this case, that would be here for red, it's 255, and then for it's just going to be 128, and just click OK. There we go. Okay, moving on, we also have some options dedicated to temporary dimension. So here for temporary dimensions, those are these dimensions that appear all around. So as you can see, we get these small blue dimensions. Now you can affect those here in the file menu and in the options on graphics. Here we have the option to play around with the size of text. So currently it's set to 8, but you can make it larger. So 8 is the smallest settings, but if you 12, click OK. Now as you can see, it's quite larger, so you can play around with that if you want. I tend to keep this set to the smallest value, which is 8, so let's bring it down to 8. But what can be really useful is the background. So as you can see, it's set to transparent, and here as you can see, all of these numbers are not really interacting with the background. So if they are over some background, like over here where it's not really readable, well, it's just going to be all transparent and unreadable. But if we turn this into opaque, so the background is now set to opaque, click OK. Now as you can see, the text has that little background, which makes it easier to read. So you can leave this turned on. I find it quite useful when it comes to using these temporary dimensions. Now we're going to be tackling the topic of adjusting the graphics at the project level. So any adjustment that we make like this will affect each view in your project. Now, if you open up a different project, there the changes will not apply, but it will apply only to the original project. Now, what's also good about this is if you make any changes that are related to graphics and you send that project to somebody else, those changes will still apply, so that is really important. Okay, so let's take a look at where can we make these, let's call them project settings that are referring, of course, to graphics. So here on our ribbon, we have the Manage tab, and on the Manage tab, we have the Systems panel. And on that Systems panel, we have the Object Styles button. So when I click this, it will open up the Object Styles dialog. And this dialog is it's basically divided into different tabs or categories. We have the model objects, we have annotation objects, we have analytical model objects, and also imported objects. Now, all of these are pretty self-explanatory. Model objects are all of the model elements, the walls, the windows, the floors, things like that. Next, we have the annotation objects. Now, these will be tags, annotation elements, dimensions, dimension lines, things like that. Now, analytical model objects are, well, they're referring to the analytical models. Now, usually in just the regular architectural template projects, you're not going to see many analytical model forms. Maybe if you're using a structural template or something like that, but you can make adjustments to these as well. And also we have imported objects, so any imported objects will appear over here, and you can make adjustments to those. Now let's go back to the model objects, just because I think it's the most common and the most important place where you can make some adjustments. So as you can see over here, first we have the filter list. Now what this allows you to do is to filter through. You want to have only the architectural model objects, structural, mechanical, electrical, or piping, or all of them. You can turn these on or off depending on what you're trying to achieve. Now in this case, just for the demonstration purposes, I'm going to leave all of these checked on. Now, if I scroll down, you can see we have a very complicated table here. It has a category over here, and here we have all of the model categories. If I scroll down, you can see these are all of the categories. Then we have the line weights. So we have this column that's divided actually into two columns. So the first one is projection. So projection is anything like this. So here we have a model, we're viewing it from far away, so that's a projection. And then cut, well, basically means that that element, that model element, is being cut. So for example, a wall or a roof in a section, that will be this cut value. Also, we have the align color, pretty self-explanatory, so that's just the color. And then we also have the align pattern as well as the material. Now, we're going to be talking about materials a bit later on. For now, let's just stick to the rest of these options. So let's find a category, and then I'm going to explain everything on that particular category. So, for example, I'm going to scroll down, and I'm actually going to scroll all the way down, and let's find Windows. So here we have the Windows basically the Windows model object, and the projection lines are set to 1, and then the cut lines are set to 3. Now, this is just the main category, but if we expand this node, as you can see, we have the option to expand that, and as you can see, we have a bunch of these subcategories. So we have the elevation swing, we have the frame or mullion, we have glass, we have some hidden lines, we have some molding, we have some mountain opening, plan swing, still head, trim, and so on. So we do have these multiple subcategories for each of our main category. So what does this affect? As you can see, it's obvious that we can make changes for these individual categories, but where can we set this up, and what does that look like in view? So in order to demonstrate this, what I'm going to do is just cancel out of this. And let's take a look at one of the floor plans. So let's maybe open up this detailed floor plan, zoom in over here, and what I'm going to do is just go here to architecture, go to Windows, and if I open up the drop menu here, when looking at the default windows, I'm just going to take one of these main ones, and let's just add a window here. So it's just a simple window. Now here we have this batting line, which I should probably get rid of. So for that, I'm just going to go here to the Modify tab, and then just use the Split Element option and split it here as well, and then just delete this middle segment. Anyways, here we have a perfectly good looking window, and let's now move it off to the side and then go back to the main Manage tab, and now let's open up the Object Styles dialog. Now let's take a look at all of those subcategories. So if I scroll all the way down, open up Windows, here you can see that some of these are larger when cut. So for example, this frame is a bit larger when cut. Also, glass is a bit thicker. So here we have some glass. It's represented a little bit thicker. And then we also have these other lines. For example, the maybe the elevation swing or something like that, or the plan swing. So in this case, this is a plan view. So this is a plan swing. So that's this line over here. It basically demonstrates in which direction the window will open, and sometimes you can use it to see what area will be affected by the swing of that window. Now, if we go here to plan swing, so I'm going with plan swing because we're in plan view. If we were in elevation view, I would adjust the elevation swing. Let's go here to plan swing and change the line pattern. Instead of solid, let's go with the dash 1.5. Hit apply. And as you can see now, this is a dashed line. Now, sometimes this is represented actually with dashed lines, so that's why I made that change. So I just wanted to demonstrate that over here. So you can make changes like this, and that will affect every element inside of the model. Now, it's not only going to apply to this window over here. Even if I go to a maybe second level, for example, and add a new window here, so let's go to Windows, add that same window, or maybe even a different window, smaller one. Still, if I zoom in over here, okay, I guess I hit cancel over here instead of OK. So let's see. Let's go to Windows, Now, it's not only going to affect this instance of this window over here. So if I just exit out of this menu, and when doing that, make sure you click OK instead of cancel, because if you cancel, it's going to cancel the change that you have made. So in order to keep this a dashed 1.5 millimeter line, you have to click OK. And now the change is applied. Now, if you even go to a different view, so let's go here to the project browser, find the second level, open that up, zoom in a little bit. I'm going to go here to the architectural panel and then go back to Windows again. And here, let's use a different type, so let's use this one. And then I'm just going to place it over here like that. As you can see here, the change will appear again. Now, the dash seems a bit different. If we go here, as you can see, the dash is a bit more closer together. Now, the reason for this is that here the scale is 1 to 100, and back in this view, the scale is 1 to 50. So if I just go back to the second level, change the scale to 1 to 50, as you can see, the dashed line will look exactly the same. So you can make any change like this, and it's going to affect your whole project and every view in it. But let's talk a little bit more in depth about these subcategories. So I'm going to go back here to the Manage tab, go back to the Object Styles dialog, and let's go back to Windows again. Here we go, Windows. And here we have those subcategories, but you may have noticed that here we have the option to modify subcategories, and then we have the option to add new subcategories, which is really cool. So how do you use this option? Well, if I were to add a new subcategory, and let's add one, let's just call it new subcategory, just to make it simple. Okay, and here it's asking us, what is this a subcategory of? Now here we have to find windows, so let's see, here they are at the bottom of the list, and as you can see here we have that new subcategory. Now we can change it. Let's change the color to red, for example. Click OK, and there we go. Now this is set to a new subcategory. Now if I hit apply and then OK, it has created this change. Now how do we use these new subcategory lines? Well, let's select this window over here, and I'm going to go here into the Edit family. So this basically opens up this window family. Now, if you go here maybe to the plan view, for example, here we go. Each one of these elements is, as you can see, now this is a group nested element, so it's a bit difficult to use. But let's try to find some geometry here. Okay, all of these seem to be nested families, so that's a bit annoying. Let's see if we can find some elements that are just inside of this family. So yeah, I guess everything is nested for these families. But let's say you want to add something to this window. So you want to add some geometry. When you go here to create, and let's create an extrusion, and let's just add, let's say, a bar on top of this window. So I'm going to set the work plane by going with the pick a plane option, click OK, and let's just select this outer face of the window, and then I'm going to add a simple rectangle above the window, just for simplicity reasons, make it smaller. There we go. Now, here we have the option to add identity data, and we can set the subcategory here. And here we can change it to any of the options that we want to use. And here we should have that, well, these new subcategories that we can create will be only available if we decide to create a new family. So for example, here I can go to the architectural tab and then go into component, and we do have the option to model in place. Now here from the list of categories, if I decide to go with the Windows category and just click OK, let's just call it window 1. Here, if I create some geometry, for example, an extrusion, in the properties, we will have the option to set the subcategory, and here that new subcategory will appear. So we can set it to new subcategory, hit apply, and then here we can add a rectangle or something like that, and as you can see, it will appear red as we have set it up in that new subcategory. And if we just hit finish, now I'm just going to click finish here, and as you can see, we have that new element, that window element in red, just because we have used that subcategory. Now I'm just going to delete this element because we don't really need it. And just to demonstrate how these subcategories work, if I were to just select this existing window, now this is a family that has been imported into this project, so this hasn't been created within this project, so keep that in mind. Now if I go here into edit family and open that family up, if I were to go and to create an extrusion here under subcategories, if I open up the drop menu, we don't have that new subcategory option. So I'm just going to cancel out of this window and exit out of that family, close it off. So these subcategories will only appear in the new families that you may want to create within the project, but not the existing ones that you decide to load into the project. So just keep that in mind. Now here I have a new empty project, and this is just because I want to demonstrate another really cool aspect that's related to these object styles, and all of the subcategories that are included. So what I'm going to do is go here to the architecture tab and then go to the wall command. You can use the WA shortcut if you want. And then over here in the properties, I'm just going to open up the drop menu, and let's select a wall that has a lot of layers. So maybe this brick on CMU, for example, or brick on metal stud, maybe this one. And here I'm just going to do a couple of wall segments and then zoom in. And then also I'm going to hit the escape key a couple of times. Now when we zoom in, we only see the outline, and that's because the detail level is set to coarse. Now detail level is view specific, and we're going to be talking about this in depth later on, but for now let's just change the detail level from coarse into fine, and as you can see, now we have all of the layers. Also, you can turn on this thin lines option, and that's going to make it a bit easier to see all of the layers. For example, here on this interior side, we have some sort of a interior finish layer, and when this thin lines option is turned off, it kind of gets swallowed by the outline of this whole wall. Now, I'm just going to leave the wall segment here off to the side like this, and then let's go to the Manage tab and open up the Object Styles dialog. Now here, once we're in this dialog, let's scroll down and find the category that's the wall category. And here, as you can see, the projection line is set to 1, and then the cut line is set to 4. So here, as you can see, 4 means that this line is thicker. If I were to change it to maybe 6, click OK, hit apply. As you can see, now this is thicker. Or if I were to change it to, let's see, if I were to change it to, I don't know, 2, and then hit apply, as you can see, that's a bit thinner. Now, what's really annoying about this object styles dialog is whenever you hit apply to apply any change to the model, it brings you to the top of the dialog. So you have to scroll all the way down and find the category that you're working with. So that can be kind of annoying, but let's just bring this back to 4, click OK and apply. There we go. Okay, so now let's open up and expand this whole walls dialog, and as you can see, it's basically it has these 3 subcategories. Now the first one is common edges, the second one is hidden lines, and the final one is wall sweeps. So the hidden lines is referring to the hidden line effect. Now we're going to be talking about that later on as well, but you do have the option to set those lines here as well. And as you can see, it's set to dashed lines. Usually hidden lines are set to some sort of a dashed or dotted line. Also here we have the wall sweep. Now again, this can be kind of self-explanatory, so I'm not going to talk about sweeps. These are just part of wall elements. But what I find mostly interesting about this particular category or subcategory is the common edges. So what common edges is referring to are these individual layers on the inside. So if I were to change the common edges, maybe align color from black into gray, and then hit OK and apply, as you can see, this now changes into that gray. Now we can also change it into something even different, so we can change it to red. apply, and as you can see now all of these lines change to red. Now if I were to click OK, as you can see here, there's a red line on the inside, so if I turn thin lines on, you can see this line turns red as well. Now this is really cool because it affects all of the interior layers, and these lines over here, these dashed lines, they are part of a hatch, so that's why they haven't changed the color, so that's the reason. We can turn off the thin lines, and let's go back into object styles. Now I'm going to return this into the normal black lines. And now let's talk about the question of why do we only have the option to affect all of the lines at once. Maybe you want to affect just a couple of these lines, or just one line, or something like that. Well, that is a bit more refinement, and unfortunately you don't have the option to affect that on this level, on the object styles level, but you do have that option when it comes to the view level. So once you come to the view, you can set up the graphics for that particular view in order to set up the individual lines and their thicknesses and colors. So let's see how that works. I'm just going to cancel out of this dialog. And next, what I'm going to do is here in the view, I'm going to open up the visibility graphics overrides dialog. So just going to edit. You can use the VG shortcut for this. Now, once we're here, you will notice that here we have the override host layer option. Now, this is referring to walls and to all of these layers over here. Now, if I just check this and hit edit, you will see that we get this host layer align style dialog. So what this allows you to do is to assign a line style, so a line weight and a line color and line pattern for each individual layer within that wall. So if you ever worked with Revit walls, you will know that all of the layers have their own function. So the functions are either structure, substrate, thermal, or air layer, and then also we have a couple of finishing layers. Now, if I just click OK and cancel out of this and select the wall, you will see that if I go here into Edit Type and go into Edit, here all of the layers, so all of the wall layers, have a certain function. Now, the function that's not going to be specified is the membrane layer, so unfortunately that's not the one that you will be able to affect. Now, I'm just going to cancel out of both of these dialogues, and now let's open up the visibility graphics overrides again and go here and check the cut line styles and click edit, and now we can edit those. So here, just according to the host layer or the function, we can change the line. So for example, let's go here to maybe the thermal air layer, and I'm just going to change it from black into red. And let's make it a bit thicker. So for example, instead of 2, let's make it line weight number 3, and then click OK, and then hit apply, click OK again. And as you can see now, this has changed. So we have changed the actual color of the individual layer. So the layer is now outlined, and of course you can use this maybe in conjunction with here, if I go to annotate with the insulation batting line or something like that to make a nice effect. So you can go into the subcategories of the wall and you can change the individual layers and change the align style of those layers, but unfortunately it's not a global change, so you can't do this for the whole project. It's only going to affect this project or this particular view. But it still affects the whole view. So you're not only affecting this wall. If you go here to the architecture tab and go to the wall command, you can create a different wall. So for example, brick on CMU. So this is a different wall, but still that layer, that thermal layer, is going to be red. You can use maybe this one. Again, same story. So you can make changes to these these views, but of course keep in mind that this is only affecting this particular view. If I were to switch here to level 2 and let's make sure that it has the same settings, so set this to fine. Again, the layer is going to be just a regular black layer and it's not going to have this change. So the only global change we can make is just change the color of all of these lines, all of the interior layer lines together, but not the individual wall layers. Now, if we open up the Object Styles dialog again, so I'm just going to go here to the Manage tab, open up Object Styles. There is one more field that I said that I was going to talk about, and that's the Material field. Now, if I scroll down, you will notice that only a few categories have an assigned material. So we have the default roof that's assigned here to floors for some reason. Then we also have the default form that's set to mass. If I scroll all the way down, default roof is also set to roofs. And then if we go even further, we have the default wall, and then we also have the earth that's set to topography. So let's explore how this works. So let's add some topography, for example, so we can see this earth material. Now I'm just going to click OK to exit out of this, and then I'm going to navigate here to the site plan. Now, the reason I went to the site plan is you can only see topography in the actual site plan, so that's why I'm here. Now, I'm just going to go here to the Masking and Site tab, and then go here and just create a topo surface, and then let's place a few points. So just an arbitrary topo surface, hit Finish, and let's just go here into the default 3D view. And I'm going to change here the visual style to realistic. And here you will notice that we have this earth look. Now I can also change it to shaded, so again it will still have this earth look, or maybe consistent colors. Again, it will have that earth material. Now keep in mind that when I select this topography here under material, it says by category. So that means that the material hasn't been yet assigned to this form, and that's why it has that earth material. Now, if I were to maybe go into just select this and then go here and change the material, I can just go ahead and affect the material here. We do have that option, but then that would of course change the material that has been assigned by the object style. Now let me delete this element and show you on a different element. So for example, what if we create maybe a wall, or a roof? Maybe let's go here to roofs. Let's create a roof on level 2, and I'm just going to create a simple rectangle, hit Finish. There we go, we have a roof, but this roof has this a blue color. Now, if I were to go here to the Manage tab, open up the Object Styles dialog, scroll down, let's find the roofs. Here we go. Roofs, it's set to default form. Now, if I open the default form up, as you can see, this is that color. So this is that color that's going to be assigned to the default roof. So that's why it looks like this. Now I'm just going to cancel out of this. So that's that color. But of course, the same thing goes with roofs. If I select this roof and go here into Edit Type and go into Structure, here for the structure, for the material, it's set to by category, so no material has been assigned. Now let me just cancel out of this and cancel out of this again. So only in cases where the material isn't assigned, you will get the default material. If I change this now to a different roof, for example this one, as you can see now it's gray, and if we go to realistic, now it has even different layers. So it has this darker layer on top and then this lighter gray layer below. So your material will be the material that's assigned to the roof or any other element, unless it's set to by category. So unless you don't really have a material assigned, it will use the. In order to demonstrate this maybe a little bit better, let's make a demonstration. So I'm going to delete this roof here and go here into the Object Styles dialog, and let's take one of the categories where we don't really have a material assigned. So for example, we can go with the casework category, and here I'm going to add a material, and I'm just going to add something recognizable. So let's type in red, and then I'm just going to use this red aluminum. Once the material is loaded in, I'm just going to hit apply and then OK. And as you can see here, for the material, it says aluminum and it's that red aluminum. Okay, so if I just hit apply now and then OK and exit out of this, now let's create a new casework family. So I'm going to go here to the architecture tab, go to component, and let's model in place. So I'm going to model in place and make sure to choose that same category. In this case, I used a casework category, so that's what I'm going to choose. Just click OK, and let's use casework 1. That's OK for the name. Okay, now I'm just going to create a simple extrusion, maybe a circle like this. Hit finish. There we go. It's a simple cylinder. Okay, and as you can see, this cylinder appears as red, so it has that red aluminum color, even though when I select it here, the material hasn't been set yet. So any other category that I start, it's not going to have this color. So for example, if I cancel out of this model, let's cancel that. If I were to go to component again, go to model in place again, and maybe go with a different category, something like doors. Let's click OK. Now, if I were to create some geometry, let's create something. There we go. So it's that classic Revit default gray color. So only if you set the material to in the object styles dialog to a certain material, it's only going to apply if that is set as a default. If in the previous few videos, I have shown you how to set up object styles menu and how to set up the lines, how to set up the thicknesses, and of course, are they maybe dashed lines or dotted lines, things like that. But I've shown you how to set those up, but not where you set up the actual line thicknesses and dashes in the lines and things like that. So in this video, we're going to be exploring all of the additional graphics settings that Revit has on offer. Now here on the Manage tab, we have the settings panel, and on the settings panel we also have the additional settings dialog. Now this will just open up the drop menu, and here, as you can see, we have some additional settings. Now here we can make some fine-tuning and fine adjustments to those elements that we later use in the object styles dialog that we have already taken a look at. So that's this over here. And also all of these elements over here are going to be used in different types of settings later on that we're going to be covering within this course. So it's a good idea to go over these and just see what we have on offer here. So first, I'm just going to start with the fill patterns. So when you click on fill patterns, it will open up the fill pattern dialog. And here, these patterns are divided into two types. So you have drafting patterns and you also have model patterns. So what's the difference? Well, drafting patterns are patterns that are going to be kind of adjusted with the scale of your project. So for example, if you're working on something maybe on a wall that's made out of concrete and it has a cross hatch, that hatch is going to have a different size or a different scale depending on the scale. So if you're at 1 to 100, it's going to have a larger scale, or if you're 1 to 10, it's going to have a smaller scale. Now, to demonstrate this effectively, let's go here to the architecture tab, and let's just create a simple wall. Maybe this wall will do the job. Let's hit escape. Now here, as you can see, this is the wall that we have adjusted to have that red thermal layer, but also here for this main structural layer, it has this crosshatch. Now currently it's at 1 to 100, but if I change that to 1 to 10, now if I zoom in, as you can see, that crosshatch is quite smaller. Now of course, if we set it to 1 to 50, it's going to be somewhere in between. So as you can see from the scale, it really depends how dense this hatch is going to be, and the scale will determine the density of the hatch. Now the reason for this is that here, and let's go back to the Manage tab, go to the additional settings and open up fill patterns. Here For example, here we have diagonal crosshatch 1.5 millimeters. This means that once you print this on a piece of paper, the distances between these lines here in the crosshatch are going to be 1.5 millimeters. So it's not going to matter, are you maybe creating a hatch that's in scale 1 to 50 or 1 to 100, the distances between these will always be 1.5 millimeters. So that's why it kind of adjusts to scale, and that's why the density will change according to scale. So once printed on a piece of paper, the hatch will always stay the same. So those are these hatches over here. Now the first one will always be the solid fill hatch. As you can see, that's currently set to solid black, and also here you have many other options. Also, alternatively over here, you have model hatches or model patterns. Now, model patterns are something different. Now, model patterns are not going to be linked up with the scale of your model. So let me explain how that works. So if I just cancel out of this, and let's get rid of this wall. So I'm just going to delete this wall, go to architecture, and then let's create a wall. And for this one, I'm going to use the brick on metal stud, for example. And let's do a wall segment here, hit escape a couple of times, and let's open up maybe the north elevation. Now here on the north elevation, as you can see when I zoom in, we have some bricks, and we have a brick pattern here on this wall. Now, if I zoom out, as you can see, it's smaller. If I zoom in, it's bigger, but currently the scale is set to 1 to 100. Now, if I were to change the scale, maybe to 1 to 10, as you can see, nothing changes. So it doesn't matter what the scale is. Even at 1 to 1, this will stay like this. Even at 1 to 1000, okay, I guess at 1 to 1000, the level of detail is so small, so this goes to gray, but let's see if I change this to fine level of detail. No, that's not going to help. So let's try 1 to 200. Okay, so still here at 1 to 200, it's going to stay the same. The lines are a bit thicker, but still the hatch pattern is going to stay the same. At 1 to 50, same story. So that's basically how these model hatches work. So model hatches or model patterns are something that you're going to be applying to the material on the outside. So if you want to have a representation of bricks like this, or maybe of some stone or some wooden flooring, something like that, you can always use these patterns, and they can look nice in elevations like this, or even in 3D views. If I go here to the quick access toolbar and open up the default 3D view, if I orbit around, okay, obviously now it's in the realistic mode, but if I turn it to hidden line, it's still going to give you that pattern that looks like bricks, or it's simulating bricks. So it does look nice. It does add a bit of complexity to the model, so it can be a good addition. So that's the main difference between those model hatches and and of course the drafting hatches. Now let's go back to the Manage tab, open up the additional settings, and let's open up Fill Patterns again. Now here for these patterns, at any point you can select one of these and you can go and edit that fill pattern. Now that will open up the edit pattern properties, and it will look something like this. So basically you have the option to preview the pattern. In this case it looks like this. Then we have the name, and then we have the type. You have the basic and the custom, and then we have some settings. Do you want parallel lines? Do you want cross hatch? And then also here you can play around with the angle as well as the spacing. So as you can see, for the diagonal down, the main one is 3mm spacing, but also we have the 1.5mm spacing option as well. And also here we have the option to orient to view, or to keep readable, or to align with element. So orient to view obviously means that it will be oriented to view. Keep readable means that once it's not readable, it's not going to look like that. It's going to change appearance, and so on. So that's the option to edit one of these hatches. You also have the option to create a new fill pattern. So you can go here and maybe do a cross hatch. You can change this to maybe 30 degrees. Oops, I've hit enter, so it created a new one, but let's go and edit that. So we have something that looks like this. You can add a name, new pattern. Let's add BA for Balkan Architect. And so you can play around with that and create new ones, but this is not that interesting. What is interesting is the option to add a custom hatch. Now, what this does, it allows you to browse here on your computer and search for a hatch pattern file. Now, I'm just going to click here on Browse, and then I think on my desktop I have a file. Now, these files have the .pat extension. Here, as you can see, it's the .hatch pat extension. This is the hatch pattern extension, and you can find these online. There are numerous websites for downloading. I will include this one in the project files for this course, so you can download it and then use it and just test it out. So I'm just going to click here, open, and now that file is loaded in. Now, in some cases, it's not going to be that visible, and the problem might be scale. So here, currently the scale is set to 1. So what you want to do is you want to play around with scale a little bit. So you might want to try maybe 10. Let's see, does that make a change? Maybe 100. Okay, still no change. Let's try 0.1. Oops. 0.1. Or maybe 0.01, and there we go. Okay, so this looks like something. So you have to play around with scale a little bit, try to go 10 to 100 to 200, I don't know, 1000, and if that doesn't work, then go with 0.1, 0.01, 0.001, and so on until that preview window shows your scale. So, or shows your hatch. Now you can find unit, maybe go with 0.02 or 0.05, depending on what you want to achieve with this, maybe 8, I don't know. So you can play around with this, and then when you set everything up, we can just click here OK, and there we go, we have that new pattern. So you can play around with this and create new hatches, and it works basically the same way here for model fill patterns. So you go here to new fill pattern, and you have basically the same options. You can go with custom or with basic and just set everything up correctly. Now I'm just going to click OK, and here also cancel out of this menu. So that covers the fill patterns menu in the additional settings dialog. In this video, we're going to be covering the topic of material assets in Revit. So material assets in Revit are, well, just those material assets. They're not actual materials that you're going to be using in the project. They are going to be the assets that Revit uses in order to create or to use your materials in your project. So what does that mean? Well, here on the Manage tab, we have the Settings panel, and here we have the materials. Now, we're going to be talking about this later on in a dedicated part, but for now, let's just open it up. And here, as you can see, you have your material browser. Here you can browse through all of the materials that are loaded in the project, and here you can edit those. So if you select one of these, you can edit its identity, graphics, appearance, physical, and thermal properties. But you can actually add in more materials. So if you open up this page underneath, here we have some additional materials. So these are those assets. These are the start materials, so the native materials that come with Revit that you can then load in by using this little arrow to add that material. And once you have that material loaded in, now you can edit it and use it in the project. So these are the assets, and these are your project materials. So that's the main difference. Now let's just cancel out of this menu. We're going to get back to that a bit later on. But for now, let's go here to additional settings, open up the drop menu, and here we have the material assets dialog. So here I'm going to select that, and here we have the asset editor, and it's basically an empty panel. Now this is the editor, but before we can edit any of these assets, we need to find them, and you can find those by clicking here on this button that opens or closes the asset browser. Now this is the asset browser, so that's that portion of your material browser that you have. So here we have all of the materials, and here you can view them. So here you have them in folders. As you can see, you can open up the folders, and then here you have all of those assets. Now you can select any of these like this, And then you can add this asset here to the asset editor, and you can make changes to the actual asset. Now, I suggest you don't make any changes unless you know exactly what you're doing. The better option will always be to leave these alone and then make the changes to the materials themselves that you load into your project. But nevertheless, you do have that option to play around with these assets. Now, I'm just going to cancel out of this menu. Now, one of the reasons why Revit is such a great and useful software is the fact that it has the option to analyze your models. Now, when it comes to doing any type of analysis in Revit, it's usually nice to have some good graphics to represent the results of those analyses that you have created. Now, here in the additional settings dialog on the settings panel on the Manage tab, you do have the option for the analysis display styles. Now, what this allows you to do is to create certain styles that you can then later on use in order to add or control the graphics of your analysis presentation. So let's see how this works. Now, as you can see here, we have an empty menu, and we have the properties button. You can open up and close those off if you want. Now, I'm just going to leave them open so we can create a new analysis display style. So to create a new style, we have this new button here on the bottom, and here you will have listed out all of the styles. Now, maybe if you're working in a company that has maybe some established analysis display styles, they would be listed out over here. Now, in this case, because this is just the default template, the architectural template that comes with Revit, we don't really have that. So let's go here and open up the new analysis display style. Now, as you can see, you can choose from numerous types. So we have a colored surface, markers with text, diagram with text, vectors with text, and also deformed shape. Now I'm going to go with the simplest one, which is the first one, the colored surface, and let's just call this one test style. Okay, once we have this created, I'm going to click OK, and as you can see, here we have that new test style. Now, it might look like this if it's just set here to show as list. You have the option for small or large icons. Let's go with the large icons just so we can see it better, and we only have one style here, so it's not a problem with space. Okay, so here, once I go to the other side where we have the properties, it's basically set in three tabs. So you have the settings tab, the color tab, and the legend tab. Let's stick to settings tab first. Now here we have just the main settings like the contour and grid settings. So do you want to have some grid lines like this? So if you want that, you can check that. Also, you have the option to show the contour, and also you can control the line weight. So it goes from 1 to 16. So 16 are the, you basically have 16 line weights in Revit, and we're going to be talking about those line weights later on. But for now, let's just set this to 1. And also you have the option to play around with line color. You can change it from black into red or something like that if you want. I'm just going to leave it black as it was. Hit apply. There we go. Okay, now let's move on to color. So for color, you can either use a gradient or ranges. Now I'm just going to stick with gradient, and here, as you can see, you can control the minimum and maximum values, and here you have the color at value. So you can change it if you want. If you want to use a different color, feel free to set that up. Maybe you have some standards within your industry or within your firm that you have to keep up with, and here is where you would set that color up. And finally, we have the legend settings. So do you want to have a legend? So first we have the option to turn the whole thing on and off. Then we have the option to show units, show names. We also have the heading text, so you can set that up. Now here, these are just the default texts that come with Revit, and I'm going to be talking about text settings a bit later on. So let's just leave this at, I don't know, 2.5 millimeter Arial. Also, we have here the description, and here we have that body text type. And also here we have rounding. So basically settings same as, for example, units or something like that. And also here we have the color range. the height and width values and shows between a minimum and maximum. And here, of course, you have that preview. Okay, I'm just going to click OK here to exit out of that menu. So we have created our first analysis display style in Revit. Okay, so that will be concluding the part 1 of this course. In the second part, I'm going to be talking about more about lines in Revit, halftone and underlay settings, tags, arrowheads, text, and also the material browser. So stay tuned for that. That course is coming in a week or so. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.